Let's go to the Heat. We're going through some of the top teams in the NBA. Biggest question you guys have for the Heat, Bill, we'll start with you.
You know, we talked on this a little bit earlier in the show. Easier said than done. It was clear to me, and I think clear to most folks in the NBA, and probably clear to the Miami Heat. They just don't have enough offensive firepower to compete in an Eastern Conference at the level that they want against some of the teams that are out there. And you have to presume that Chris Middleton, we hope, will be healthy for a playoff run next year. I don't believe the Nets are going to be any more dangerous next season, but that's certainly not a universal view. They could be. The Boston Celtics, who just made the finals, may take a step forward. You just go through the East. It is not an easy place to compete. They need another offensive superstar. Now, Zach LaVine, Bradley Beal are guys we've talked about. They're technically able to move. The expectation from sources is that they won't. I know Joel Embiid was flirting with the Heat a little bit, or that was the perception on Twitter when he was tweeting them a little bit and about them, but just talking to Heat sources. Again, I could hear them rolling their eyes when I asked them if they might make a move for Embiid. But Pat Riley can be a surprise, and he's not going after Embiid. That's not happening. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Heat, if they can find something, try to go get a little more extra offensive firepower. Tobias Harris is a guy that reportedly is available, and I haven't checked with Heat sources on whether or not that's a name that they're targeting, but some kind of offensive star or something approximating that is what the Heat need.
Yeah, and my move for the Heat, my question for them, it kind of ties in with what Bill's saying, is can you trade Duncan Robinson? And if they do end up getting a star, they have to do some sort of sign and trade or just an outright trade. Duncan Robinson's salary is probably going to be included in that. This is a player who's going to be attractive to other teams. He's an incredible three-point shooter. Obviously, last year and last postseason didn't work out for him. But that doesn't mean that all of a sudden he can't shoot. The Heat just have a replacement for him in Max Strus, who's much cheaper. So I think obviously they're going to be looking to move him. And whether it's, for a superstar or whether it's just kind of unloading him on one of these teams like, the Thunder or the Rockets or one of these non-competitive teams to try to get off that salary, because they're going to have to pay Tyler Hero this summer and extend him. And like Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins, he wants to get the bag. So they're going to need to free up as much money as possible. And Duncan Robinson has kind of fallen out of the rotation, fallen out of favor in Miami. So I think that's an important piece to move in order for this team to go forward.
Let's stay in the East. Let's go to the Nets here, who, by the way, when it comes to betting, still have the second best odds behind Golden State to win the title next year. I feel like there are so many questions when it comes to this Nets team. Colin, what's your biggest one, though?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest question we've had for a long time. What are they going to do about Ben Simmons? How are they going to handle him? He had back surgery. When do you call him back and say, hey, look, we need you to come in and work out? If he's working out and says, it's still not right, well past the timetable when he should be back, what do you do? This is just such a confusing, kind of unprecedented situation where we don't know if this guy, Ben Simmons, as talented as he is, actually wants to play basketball. So to me, obviously there's Kyrie stuff going on with the Nets, but to me, Ben Simmons is really the key to taking this team to the next level because of his defensive ability, because of his ability to push the ball in transition. But first, you need to make sure that he is mentally prepared to play and physically prepared to play after having not played for so long. So this is a very, very difficult situation for the Nets, and that's my biggest question heading into this offseason.
I don't know if we have any Stranger Things fans here on the show, but I am a fan. I can tell you this. The Brooklyn Nets are the upside down. They should be great. It should be wonderful. They should win, and everything is backwards. Bizarro is the exact right word, and I'm not sure anybody encapsulates that better than Kyrie Irving. And it is an upside-down choice and decision that Brooklyn has. Because on the one hand, they don't really have a lot of options in terms of their cap space with Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving can opt into his deal in, a week and a half at $36.5 million is what it is. He wants a whole bunch of money. As Colin said, he wants to get that bag. And what I'm hearing, and those reports out there about this, is that there might be a movement and there might be some compromise toward a shorter-term deal. Something we might see with some of the guys out there who have a lot of upside talent-wise. I think James Harden is another example of this, but who haven't been able for a variety of reasons to be consistent or reliable. Obviously, Kyrie has not been reliable, hasn't played some games. You heard the GM of that organization at their exit interviews with the media say, in effect, we need people who want to be here. So a shorter-term deal for Kyrie Irving, how they handle that, what they pay him, what the compromise is, I think is going to be really critical. We think Kyrie wants to be a Brooklyn Net and stay with his buddy Kevin Durant. We think the Brooklyn Nets want to pay Kyrie, but not for the entirety of a max deal. But again, Everything in Brooklyn is upside down. Nothing makes sense. It really was a horror story for an organization that thought they were going to be great. And when it comes to Kyrie Irving, it is dangerous territory to ever try and guess what in the world he is thinking or going to be thinking when the decision time comes.
I do not know anything about the Stranger Things, but someone else where it's hard to try to predict what they want to do would be James Harden. Let's go to the 76ers here. Colin, what's your biggest question for the 76ers?
Yeah, for me, I'm going to put James Harden aside for the second. And what are they going to do on the wing? How are they going to get help on the wing? This is a team that was playing Matisse Thybulle in the playoffs, and he could barely even stay on the court despite his defensive prowess. Other than that, you have Danny Green, who's obviously just been injured. What are they going to do to get three-point shooting and defense on the wing? I don't care whether you have James Harden, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris. This is a league of wings, and if you can't have three-point spacing, and if you can't have defensive players who can lock down the other team's best perimeter players, you're not going anywhere. You're not going to win a title. So to me, there are questions about the stars, obviously, but I think what they need to do around the fringes, what type of players can they get with the financial restrictions that they have because of all the money they're paying their stars? To me, it's what are they going to do on the wing, and how are they going to get effective players to fill in those positions?
Yeah, I mean, Daryl Morey has his hands full. The gentleman who now runs basketball operations, the basically super GM. He's got a bigger title than that. And that's a huge part of it. Keeping Joel Embiid is really important, and James Harden. And it's not just a basketball problem, though it is a basketball problem. It's also a political problem because Daryl Morey came in. Obviously, he was the GM in Houston when James Harden was there. They had a lot of success together. He trades away Ben Simmons and a lot of other important pieces to get James Harden. And by the way, Colin hit on this earlier in the show. It is a mercy for Daryl Morey that Ben Simmons has not played basketball yet, or that trade would look even more atrocious. James Harden has looked old. He has looked slow. He has looked out of shape, and he has often looked ineffective. Now, we know he can play at a high level. He did at times for the Nets this past season before demanding a trade, but I know there's not a lot of comfort in that front office, even with Daryl Morey's commitment to and need to get something back from James Harden to give him a 5-year max deal that will pay him an absurd amount of money when he's 36, 37 years old. So I think a huge part of a very busy offseason for that organization is finding some sort of deal with James Harden. Again, like Kyrie Irving, maybe it's a shorter deal that includes the opt-in and the massive amount of money that's going to include, but a little bit less on the back end, a 3-year deal, a 4-year deal. But Daryl Morey's ability to compromise with James Harden, who he's bet a lot of his own political capital on within that organization, with that owner, is going to be a critical part of Philadelphia's offseason.
All right, let's hop over to the West. Let's talk about the Suns. Look, if it was the end of the regular season, we're like, the Suns are they're gonna do it. Chris Paul is finally gonna get his ring. 37 years old now. Bill, what's your biggest question for the Suns?
So there's a lot, and I'm sure DeAndre Ayton. There's a lot of things you can look at. We have such recency bias, and it's really easy when something happens to be like, that's the biggest thing in the world. And look at me, I'm the guy saying that who thinks Steph's a top 5 all-time player, though I do, and I have for a long time. The Suns were in the finals a year ago. And they did not accomplish what they wanted this year, but they have a really good young core. For me, I think a really important question of what they do or don't do, and they'll have to know this internally, is whether or not the Chris Paul we saw for most of the year is the guy they're going to have next season. Dynamic, one of the great point guards in the history of the game, a winner. It's a perfect fit, really, for him in Phoenix. Or the Chris Paul we saw toward the end of the playoffs. He looked exhausted. He looked worn out. I understand we've had some condensed NBA seasons, and sources I've talked to think that's been a contributing factor for a lot of guys who've hit walls, especially guys like Chris Paul who's older. But CP3, where he's at, whether he's at his limit, whether or not he's hit that age where it's just diminishing returns from here on in, is going to be a really important thing for the Suns to understand and to adjust around. Or if not, if he's who he was the first part of the year, to not adjust around, I think is really important for what the Suns do.
Yeah, and for me, it kind of ties into that. As Chris Paul ages, as he becomes less effective, as he needs more rest days, more load management, you're going to need another guy, and that guy might be DeAndre Ayton. Obviously, they've had kind of some friction in that relationship with the Suns not extending him. DeAndre Ayton, his people have said that he was kind of hurt by that. But ultimately, if they decide that they want to pay DeAndre Ayton, they can bring him back because he's a restricted free agent. So my question is, if he gets a max offer from another team, are the Suns going to be willing to match that? There's teams like Portland, maybe Indiana, other teams with cap space that can throw a max contract at Ayton. And are the Suns willing to pay that? They weren't willing to pay it for his extension. Are they going to be willing to pay it now? And as I said, it ties into Bill's question. If Chris Paul is not able to perform at the level that we've seen over the last few seasons, Ayton becomes so much more important because now he becomes that second guy, gets a few more post touches, a few more pick and rolls with Devin Booker, things like that. So I'm very curious to see how the Suns handle a center in the modern NBA, which, as we know, isn't the most high leverage position. But for the Suns specifically, it seems like Ayton is an important piece. And will they be willing to pay up for him if it comes to that?
All right, finally to the team that beat the Suns in the postseason, the Dallas Mavericks there. We've talked about getting help for Luka. But Colin, what is your biggest question when it comes to the Mavericks this offseason?
Yeah, it's similar to the Suns with Ayton, and it's how much is too much for Jalen Brunson. Obviously, we've seen what this guy's capable of. If the Mavericks are unable to get a superstar to put next to Luka Doncic, Jalen Brunson has proven that he is more than capable of playing that role. And also when Luka was out in the playoffs, he stepped up and was an absolute scoring machine. So this is a guy who's very important to this team. But again, if he gets a gigantic offer and you're locked in for 5 years with this guy, is he the one who's going to take you to the next level and get you past the Western Conference Finals into the NBA Finals? That's a question that Mark Cuban, the entire front office, and the rest of this Mavericks organization have to ask themselves. If the price tag gets too high, are they going to be willing to pay that to Jalen Brunson?
Yeah, and I'm going to just piggyback on what Colin said. You have to get, I know we discussed this earlier, you have to get Luka Doncic a co-star. If you get a co-star with him in that organization, they're good enough to win an NBA championship. There's other factors, I understand that, but they'll have the talent. For me, I don't think Jalen Brunson is that guy. And talking to some folks around the NBA, there is other skepticism whether or not he can be that guy, the second best player on a championship team. So Colin's right. They have to figure out Brunson, and at least for my money, I think they have to figure out a solution that is not Jalen Brunson. His market value is going to be much higher than I think his actual worth. This is what happens when teams are desperate to go and get somebody, anybody. If I'm the Mavericks, you don't have to gamble on Jalen Brunson. You don't have to be desperate. You have a long-term plan with Luka Doncic. We talked about Zach LaVine. We talked about Bradley Beal. I know they're unlikelihoods, but that's the level of target if I'm the Dallas Mavericks I'm going after.
Guys, thanks so much. Regardless, it's going to be a very interesting offseason when it comes to the NBA. Colin and Bill, enjoy your weekend. We'll talk to you soon. Taking a look at upcoming notable NBA dates. Of course, it all begins with the draft next Thursday. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.